The sun had barely risen over the modern African town, yet its light bounced off the tall glass buildings like 1,000 bright mirrors. Cars moved on clean roads, children hurried to school, and shops buzzed with life. But behind all this modern beauty, the heartbeat of old traditions still echoed. Drums, stories, and sacred customs lived quietly in the corners of the town where the ancestors were still honored. Far from the city noise stood the homestead of the late Chief Manla, one of the last great leaders who had kept tradition alive even as the world raced forward. Today, the compound was filled with villagers dressed in deep shades of mourning cloth. Elders sat in long lines, holding their walking sticks, whispering words of wisdom. Women moved slowly, carrying pots of water and burning herbs. The air felt heavy, not just with sadness, but with respect. Soft drums played in the distance, their rhythm slow and steady, like the heartbeat of an old spirit. Each beat reminded the people that a chief had gone to join the ancestors. "Cato, my son," an old woman said as she placed her hand on his shoulder, "your father was a great man. Walk with strength today." Cato nodded but said nothing. His eyes were swollen from crying through the night. He was a humble young man, gentle in nature, known for helping the villagers even when he barely had anything himself. Now, with his father gone, he stood like a tree trying to stay strong in a storm. Amara, his wife, walked toward him slowly. Her eyes showed love, but her steps showed worry. She touched Cato's hand gently. "I'm here," she whispered. He looked at her with a sad smile. "I know, and I thank the ancestors for giving me a wife like you." But even as they shared this soft moment, the air suddenly shifted. The noise of loud car engines broke the sacred silence. 3 luxury cars rolled into the compound, shiny like polished gold. People turned their heads immediately. Everyone knew who it was: the Okoro family. They stepped out dressed in bright colors that did not match the morning atmosphere. Gold jewelry, expensive perfumes, sunglasses, even though the sun was still gentle. Their pride filled the compound like a bad wind. One of Amara's cousins whispered loudly, "Look at Cato, still wearing the same cheap sandals, even on his father's funeral." Another added with a smirk, "Maybe the chief left him nothing. Even the land looks tired." Amara's face tightened with shame. She wanted to defend her husband, but fear of her family's judgment held her tongue. Her aunt leaned close to her and whispered sharply, "You marry below your level, child. Today the whole village will see it." Cato heard everything, but he kept his eyes downward. His father had always told him, a man's dignity is not in his wealth, but in how he carries his pain. Today, those words fell heavier than ever. At the center of the compound stood Uncle Baraka, the village elder. His voice carried power even in silence. He was the keeper of Chief Manla's final wishes, the one holding the seal that everyone whispered about. Some villagers said the chief had left nothing. Others claimed the Okoro family secretly planned to take everything. And a few believed it will contain something that would shock the whole town. 2 young men whispered behind Cato. "They say the chief's land has already been sold." "No, I heard he left all his cattle to the elders." Maybe he left nothing at all." Poor Cato. The rumors spread like dust carried by the wind. Every whisper stabbed deeper into Cato's heart. He looked at his father's hut, remembering his warm laughter, his strong hands, his teachings. Now, all he could do was stand and bear the mockery. Amara stepped closer to him. "Cato, don't let their words break you." He looked up slowly. "It is not their words. It is the silence of not knowing my father's last wish." Just then, Uncle Baraka lifted his staff. The drums stopped instantly. The air became still. Even the wind seemed to pause. "My people," Baraka announced, "the time will come when the chiefs will read. Until then, let respect guide your tongues." His eyes swept across the Okoro family, who pretended not to notice. Then he looked at Cato, and for a moment, his face softened. It was a look that carried a message, a warning, maybe even a promise. And in that moment, everyone felt something shift, like the ancestors themselves were watching. Somewhere in the stillness, a whisper of destiny stirred. Something powerful, something hidden, something that would change everything for Cato and expose the pride of those who mocked him. No one knew it yet, but the truth inside that seal would break hearts, raise voices, and shake the village to its core. The story of humiliation and dignity had only just begun. The morning sun was gentle as it spread its warm light across the modern African town. Tall buildings rose behind the hills, shining like silver spears in the distance. The roads were smooth, the markets busy, and the sound of modern life filled the air. Yet beneath all this progress, the old tradition still breathed like an ancient spirit refusing to fade. At the edge of this bustling town stood the homestead of the late Chief Manla, a place where the old ways still ruled. Mud walls decorated with tribal patterns surrounded the compound. Carved wooden masks watched over the courtyard. A sacred fire burned slowly at the center, its smoke curling toward the sky, as if delivering prayers to the ancestors themselves. On this day, the air was heavy with grief. Villagers moved quietly through the gates, dressed in deep earth-colored cloth. Elders walked slowly, leaning on beautifully carved staffs that had been passed down for generations. Women carried pots of water and bowls of herbs used for cleansing the spirit of the dead. Children stood silently beside their parents, sensing the weight of the moment. Soft drum beats echoed in the background, steady, slow, and respectful. Each beat was a reminder of tradition, a rhythm that had guided the village through births, marriages, and now, the passing of a leader. Cato stood near the hut where his father's body rested. His eyes were red, but he held his head high. He had always been known as a kind man, humble and hard-working. Today, the strength in his face seemed carved by pain. A neighbor placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your father walks with the ancestors now, Cato. He was a man of honor. Hold on to his teachings." Cato nodded but stayed silent. Inside his heart, a storm brewed, lost fear and uncertainty mixing like dark clouds. Amara walked toward him slowly, her steps unsure. She held his hand gently. "Cato, you don't have to carry this alone." He looked at her with a tired smile. "Your presence gives me strength." But before they could share more, the atmosphere suddenly changed. A loud engine roared from outside the compound. Heads turned. Whispering began. The Okoro family had arrived. 3 luxury cars, shiny, polished, and loud, rolled into the sacred space. Their entrance felt like a strange shadow crossing the sun. Amara's relatives stepped out wearing clothes too bright for a funeral. Jewelry sparkled on their wrists, necks, and ears. Their perfumes filled the air, overpowering the smell of burning herbs. One of Amara's aunts looked around with a proud smirk. So this is where the chief lived? I expected more." Another whispered loudly, "Poor Cato. Even in death, his father could not escape poverty." Amara's heart tightened in shame. She looked at Cato, hoping he hadn't heard. But he had. His jaw tightened and his eyes dropped to the ground. The pain was clear, but he refused to respond. Amara's cousin pointed at Cato's worn sandals and laughed softly. "It seems he cannot even afford new shoes for his father's burial." The villagers frowned but stayed silent out of respect for the dead. But the Okoro family's mockery spread like a cold wind. Nearby, Uncle Baraka, the respected elder and the keeper of Chief Manla's final wishes, leaned on his staff. His wise eyes studied the scene, heavy with disapproval. His voice, when it finally rose, carried authority. "Today is not a day for pride," he said firmly. "The dead deserve respect. Let your hearts be calm." The Okoro family fell silent for a moment, but their smirks did not fade. In the midst of all this, whispers traveled through the crowd. "They say the chief left nothing in his will. I heard even the land will be taken. Poor Cato after everything his father did for this village." Each rumor felt like a stone thrown at Cato's dignity. He closed his eyes briefly. "Father, what did you leave behind? Why did you seal your will?" Amara touched his arm gently. "Don't let these words break you," he sighed. "I'm not hurt by their voices. I'm hurt by the silence between me and my father's last wish." The drum beats suddenly stopped. All eyes turned to Uncle Baraka as he raised his staff high. The entire homestead fell quiet. "Manla was not just a chief," he said, his deep voice echoing. "He was a man of wisdom. His final words will soon be revealed." A wave of tension rippled through the crowd. The Okoro family exchanged greedy glances. The villagers waited with cautious hope. Kato felt his heart tremble inside his chest. Somewhere in the silence, it felt as though the ancestors were drawing closer, watching, waiting. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, the air filled with a strange energy, one that whispered of truth, justice, and a revelation powerful enough to change Kato's life forever. The funeral had brought sorrow, but what was coming next would bring thunder. Soft, steady drum beats rolled to the late Chief Manla's homestead, rising and falling like the breath of an old spirit watching over its people. The modern town around them had tall buildings and busy roads, but here, inside the chief's compound, tradition still ruled. Men stood with bowed heads. Women wrapped in deep-colored cloth whispered prayers. Even the wind moved gently, as if afraid to disturb the grief that lay heavy in the air. Kato stood near his father's hut, his eyes swollen from sleepless nights. His hands trembled slightly, but he kept them clasped together. "Baba, I hope I make you proud," he murmured under his breath. He tried to be strong, but the weight of loss pressed his heart like a stone. Amara stepped beside him, touching his arm softly. "Kato, you have carried everything with courage. Even your silence speaks loudly." She looked at him with worry, torn between her love and the noise of her family. Her heart felt split in two. Just then, the Okoro family arrived. Their clothes sparkled under the sun, golden jewelry, polished shoes, designer fabrics that did not belong in a mourning place. They walked in with high chins, as if they owned the air around them. A few villagers exchanged uncomfortable glances. One of Amara's cousins leaned toward another and whispered loudly, "Look at him! Chief Manla's only son, yet he stands like a poor goat beaten by the rain." Another snickered. What will he inherit? Dust? Maybe that old cracked pot his father loved so much. The words cut into Kato's ears. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Silence was the last respect he could offer his father. Amara heard it too. Her chest tightened with anger and shame. "Please, not today," she whispered to her family. But they ignored her. Their mother, Madame Okoro, fanned herself dramatically. "Amara, my daughter, you should never have married into such a small life. Even in death, the chief leaves nothing but emptiness." Kato lowered his head further. Each word felt sharper than a spear. Then Uncle Baraka stepped forward. He was an elder with deep wrinkles, a wise man respected by all. His staff tapped the ground with authority as he moved. "The Diar, your father walks with the ancestors now, Kato. He was a man of honor. Hold on to his teachings." Kato nodded but stayed silent. Inside his heart, a storm brewed, lost fear and uncertainty mixing like dark clouds. Amara walked toward him slowly, her steps unsure. She held his hand gently. "Kato, you don't have to carry this alone." He looked at her with a tired smile. "Your presence gives me strength." But before they could share more, the atmosphere suddenly changed. A loud engine roared from outside the compound. Heads turned. Whispering began. The Okoro family had arrived. 3 luxury cars, shiny, polished, and loud, rolled into the sacred space. Their entrance felt like a strange shadow crossing the sun. Amara's relatives stepped out wearing clothes too bright for a funeral. Jewelry sparkled on their wrists, necks, and ears. Their perfumes filled the air, overpowering the smell of burning herbs. One of Amara's aunts looked around with a proud smirk. So this is where the chief lived? I expected more." Another whispered loudly, "Poor Kato. Even in death, his father could not escape poverty." Amara's heart tightened in shame. She looked at Kato, hoping he hadn't heard. But he had. His jaw tightened, and his eyes dropped to the ground. The pain was clear, but he refused to respond. Amara's cousin pointed at Kato's worn sandals and laughed softly. "It seems he cannot even afford new shoes for his father's burial." The villagers frowned but stayed silent out of respect for the dead. But the Okoro family's mockery spread like a cold wind. Nearby, Uncle Baraka, the respected elder and the keeper of Chief Manla's final wishes, leaned on his staff. His wise eyes studied the scene, heavy with disapproval. His voice, when it finally rose, carried authority. "Today is not a day for pride," he said firmly. The dead deserve respect. Let your hearts be calm. The Okoro family fell silent for a moment, but their smirks did not fade. In the midst of all this, whispers traveled through the crowd. They say the chief left nothing in his will. I heard even the land would be taken. Poor Cato after everything his father did for this village. Each rumor felt like a stone thrown at Cato's dignity. He closed his eyes briefly. Father, what did you leave behind? Why did you seal your will? Amara touched his arm gently. Don't let these words break you. He sighed. I'm not hurt by their voices. I'm hurt by the silence between me and my father's last wish. The drum beats suddenly stopped. All eyes turned to Uncle Baraka as he raised his staff high. The entire homestead fell quiet. Manla was not just a chief, he said, his deep voice echoing. He was a man of wisdom. His final words will soon be revealed. A wave of tension rippled through the crowd. The Okoro family exchanged greedy glances. The villagers waited with cautious hope. Cato felt his heart tremble inside his chest. Somewhere in the silence, it felt as though the ancestors were drawing closer, watching, waiting. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, the air filled with a strange energy, one that whispered truth, justice, and a revelation powerful enough to change Cato's life forever. The funeral had brought sorrow, but what was coming next would bring thunder. Soft, steady drum beats rolled to the late Chief Manla's homestead, rising and falling like the breath of an old spirit watching over its people. The modern town around them had tall buildings and busy roads, but here, inside the chief's compound, tradition still ruled. Men stood with bowed heads. Women wrapped in deep-colored cloth whispered prayers. Even the wind moved gently, as if afraid to disturb the grief that lay heavy in the air. Cato stood near his father's hut, his eyes swollen from sleepless nights. His hands trembled slightly, but he kept them clasped together. Baba, I hope I make you proud, he murmured under his breath. He tried to be strong, but the weight of loss pressed his heart like a stone. Amara stepped beside him, touching his arm softly. Cato, you have carried everything with courage. Even your silence speaks loudly. She looked at him with worry, torn between her love and the noise of her family. Her heart felt split in two. Just then, the Okoro family arrived. Their clothes sparkled under the sun, golden jewelry, polished shoes, designer fabrics that did not belong in a mourning place. They walked in with high chins, as if they owned the air around them. A few villagers exchanged uncomfortable glances. One of Amara's cousins leaned toward another and whispered loudly, Look at him, Chief Manla's only son, yet he stands like a poor goat beaten by the rain. Another snickered. What will he inherit? Dust? Maybe that old cracked pot his father loved so much. The words cut into Cato's ears. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Silence was the last respect he could offer his father. Amara heard it too. Her chest tightened with anger and shame. Please, not today, she whispered to her family. But they ignored her. Their mother, Madame Okoro, fanned herself dramatically. Amara, my daughter, you should never have married into such a small life. Even in death, the chief leaves nothing but emptiness. Cato lowered his head further. Each word felt sharper than a spear. Then Uncle Baraka stepped forward. Beats softened as if bowing to him. People of Manla's land, he said, raising a hand. Let your tongues show respect. A man has returned to the ancestors. His voice carried the strength of tradition, making even the Okoro family shift uncomfortably. He looked at Cato with eyes full of old understanding. Your father left more than this world can see. Let the dust settle. Let truth come at the right time. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Someone muttered, But they say the chief left nothing. Another replied, Maybe the boy will be left with empty hands. Cato swallowed hard. The humiliation burned inside him, but he did not react. Tears threatened to escape, but he forced them down. In their culture, pain was carried quietly during mourning, hidden like a sacred burden. Amara stepped closer, gripping his hand tightly. Cato, don't let their words break you. Your father's spirit is watching. Cato's voice trembled. I know, but their laughter, it pierces deeper than I expected. Thunder rumbled far in the distance, though the sky was clear, as if the ancestors themselves disapproved of the cruelty around the grieving young man. Uncle Baraka raised his staff once more. Let this day remain holy. The chiefs will remain sealed until the time is right. And when that time comes, those who mocked will learn a bitter lesson. A hush spread across the homestead. Even the Okoro family paused, their smiles fading slightly. But arrogance still lingered in their eyes. Cato lifted his head slowly, drawing strength from the steady drums echoing in the air. As the wind passed through the compound, it brushed against him like his father's final blessing. He whispered to himself, "Let the truth come. I will endure until then." The scene closed with quiet stillness, a breath held by the entire village, waiting for the revelation the chief had left behind. The air inside Chief Manla's homestead felt heavy, as if the sky itself had come down to sit with the mourners. Though the town around them had grown modern, with busy shops, paved streets, and tall buildings, inside this compound, time moved with the slow rhythm of old customs. The soft beat of drums echoed in the background, steady and patient, like the heartbeat of the ancestors watching unseen. Cato sat quietly near the old wooden stool his father used to love. His shoulders were slightly bent, his eyes red from nights without rest. Grief clung to him like a long shadow. Every visitor who entered bowed their heads out of respect, but their whispers followed him like smoke. "Poor boy," one woman murmured behind her wrapper. "Losing a father is losing the roof over your life." "He has nothing left now," another whispered. "Even the will, they say it is empty." Cato heard every word, yet he kept still. In his culture, men did not shout during mourning. They swallowed their pain, letting silence speak where their tears could not. Amara walked toward him with slow, careful steps. Her eyes softened when she saw him, but the worry inside her couldn't hide. "Cato," she said gently, kneeling beside him, "you don't have to carry this alone." "I am trying," he replied, his voice low. "But my heart feels like dry earth, cracking on the sun." Before she could answer, the sound of loud chatter broke through the respectful quiet. The Okoro family had arrived. Their clothes sparkled too brightly for a funeral. Colorful gowns, heavy gold jewelry, expensive shoes that clicked with pride. They walked as if they were attending a celebration, instead of mourning a great chief. Madame Okoro sniffed the air. "Ah, this place smells humble," she said loudly, making sure everyone heard. One of her sons laughed. "Sister Amara should have married into a family with real wealth. Look at this place." Another cousin leaned closer, smirking. "Does the boy even know what an inheritance is? Or will he inherit only firewood and dust?" Their voices carried across the compound, slicing through Cato's heart like sharp blades. Amara froze, her cheeks burning with shame and anger. "Mother, please," she whispered. "This is not the time." But the Okoros never cared for time, only for pride. Madame Okoro folded her arms. "I speak only truth. A chief who leaves nothing behind is a chief who failed his family." Cato's hands tightened. He lowered his head even more, fighting the ache rising inside him. The drumbeat suddenly softened. Uncle Baraka stepped forward. He was old, his beard gray, but his presence carried power. The staff in his hand struck the ground firmly, commanding silence as naturally as thunder commands the sky. "Enough," he said, his voice deep and calm. "A funeral is sacred. Let your tongues be washed with respect." The Okoro family reluctantly quieted, though their eyes still sparkled with arrogance. Baraka looked at Cato, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "My son, your father walked with dignity. Do not let the noise of small hearts shake yours." Cato tried to speak, but emotion tightened his throat. "Uncle, they say Baba left nothing. They laugh at me." Baraka's eyes narrowed with ancient wisdom. "People laugh at what they do not understand. The chief's will is sealed for a reason. Truth has its own time to rise, like the sun." A few villagers nodded. Even the wind blew gently, as if agreeing. Amara took Cato's hand, her voice trembling. "Cato, I don't care what they say. Your father was a good man. That alone is a wealth many never have." Cato closed his eyes for a moment. He felt the ground beneath him, the same ground his father had walked, worked, and lived on. He felt the ancestors watching, listening. Then I will hold myself together, he whispered. For him, for what he believed in. Above them, a quiet bird landed on the old roof, tilting its head as if it too sensed the moment. A small sign, simple but meaningful, reminding everyone that the world still watched. Baraka lifted his staff again. Let the drums continue. Let the morning be purer. And let the truth of Chief Manla's last words come when the time is right. As the drums resumed their steady rhythm, the compound settled back into a heavy but respectful silence. Yet beneath that calmness, something else stirred, like a hidden river ready to rise. A quiet promise of a revelation soon to come. The sun hung low over Chief Manla's homestead, casting long shadows across the compound. Women in dark wrappers sat on woven mats, murmuring quiet prayers. Elders stood in small circles, their faces carved with wisdom and sorrow. Even the wind moved slowly, as if paying its respects to the fallen chief. Through all the noise and movement, Amara stood frozen. Her heart kept pulling her toward Cato, who sat alone near the old mango tree, shoulders bent under the weight of loss. But the voices of her proud Okoro family wrapped around her like invisible chains, refusing to let her move. Her mother's sharp whisper cut the air. Amara, stand straight. You are an Okoro woman. Do not embarrass us by running after that boy. Amara's fingers tightened around her wrapper. Mama, he just lost his father. He needs me. Her mother scoffed. He needs money. He needs status. He needs what he never had. But you, she tapped Amara's chest, you must never forget where you come from. Amara's younger sister smirked. Look at him, sitting there like a lost goat. If he had come from a real family, he would not be crushed like this. Amara felt a sting in her heart, sharper than any knife. She turned toward Cato again. His eyes stared at the ground, hollow and weary. She knew that silence. She knew that pain. She had seen it in him many times. Silent wounds he never spoke of, but still, she did not move. The Okoro cousins whispered loudly on purpose. Imagine marrying into a house where the roof leaks, and they say the chief left nothing, not even a proper will. Amara could have done better, much better. Each word struck her like a stone. She slowly stepped away from them, but her mother's hand clamped around her wrist. Amara, the grip was strong, almost burning. You will not go there. People are watching. She swallowed hard. Her voice trembled. Let them watch, Mama. They watched when he treated me with kindness. They watched when he helped your own brother, when he fell sick. Why can they not watch when I stand by him now? Her mother's face stiffened with pride, because kindness does not buy respect. Amara felt her chest tighten. Her heart tugged harder toward Cato, but her family's expectations held her like ropes. She could almost hear the ancestors whispering through the wind. A wife must stand by her husband. A family must stand with truth. But the Okoros believed only in power. Uncle Baraka approached quietly, his steps slow but steady. The wooden staff in his hand tapped the ground with the rhythm of an old drumbeat. When he reached Amara, he looked deeply into her eyes. My child, he said in a warm but firm voice, a woman's heart knows its own path. When you ignore it, you walk on thorns. Amara blinked, tears threatening. Uncle, I want to go to him, but your family holds your feet. Baraka nodded knowingly. Such things happen when pride grows bigger than love. Madame Okoro's eyes hardened. Baraka, do not fill her head with village sayings. We are not simple people. Baraka turned to her calmly. Pride is a tree whose branches scratch the owner before they scratch others. A few villagers murmured in agreement. Madame Okoro clicked her tongue. This is nonsense. Amara will stay where she is. But Baraka stepped closer, lowering his voice so that only she could hear. It was Chief Manla himself who told me. Baraka, remind my children that love, not pride, keeps a house standing. Madame Okoro's face twitched, unsure how to respond. Baraka turned back to Amara. Child, your husband sits in sorrow. If you do not go to him now, when will you? Amara felt something inside her break free. She gently pulled her wrist from her mother's grip. I cannot leave him alone, she whispered. Her mother gasped. Amara... But Amara had already stepped forward. Her steps were small at first, then steady, then strong. The villagers watched in silence. Even the drum beats softened, as if giving space for her choice. Cato looked up when her shadow fell over him. Surprise flickered in his tired eyes. Amara, you came. She knelt beside him without hesitation. Where else would I be? He opened his mouth to speak, but emotion stopped him. His eyes glistened, and she gently placed her hand over his. Behind them, the Okoro family stared with narrowed eyes, their pride bruised but powerless for the moment. Their whispers faded into the background. Baraka smiled faintly. When a woman follows her heart, he said to the villagers. The ancestors beat their drums a little softer. Amara leaned her head against Cato's shoulder. He breathed shakily, and for the first time since dawn, he felt a small piece of comfort. But deep in the compound, the seal will of Chief Manla sat waiting, silent, dangerous, and ready to turn their world upside down. A calm before a storm, a breath before a revelation, and the ancestors watched it all. The sun hung low over the modern town of Makuta, a place where tall shops and painted houses stood side by side with ancient shrines and wide clay courtyards. Even with the changes of time, the people still walked with the rhythm of their ancestors. Today, that rhythm was heavy with sorrow. Soft drums echoed across Chief Manla's homestead. The mourners moved like dark shadows, wrapped in cloths of black and brown. The air carried the smell of burning herbs, and the low hum of grief rolled through the compound. Even the birds seemed to understand that a great tree had fallen. Cato sat near the front, his head bowed, his hands trembling slightly. He was a humble young man who had always walked behind his father, learning quietly, listening deeply. Now, without Chief Manla, he felt like a child lost in a vast forest. Amara sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. Her eyes were full of worry and silent love. But love was not the only thing in the air. From the entrance of the homestead came the clicking of expensive heels and the swish of bright clothes not meant for mourning. The Okoro family arrived like peacocks among ravens, dressed in gold, deep purple, and sharp perfumes that did not belong at a funeral. Their jewelry sparkled loudly, as if trying to outshine the sadness of the day. The whispers began before their feet touched the ground. Ah, so this is where Amara chose to live? One aunt murmured loudly. And look at these mud-brown walls. Even my driver would not stay here, another said with a smirk. They moved through the mourners, lifting their noses as if the air offended them. Amara heard them. Her heart tightened, but she stayed still. Tradition demanded respect. Pain must be hidden like a wound under cloth. She squeezed Cato's hand. Cato tried to keep his eyes down, but the words pierced him like thorns. Poor boy, one uncle whispered loudly enough for all to hear. I heard Chief Manla left nothing behind, not even a coin. Another replied, shaking his head dramatically. Some people inherit pride, others inherit dust. A few mourners looked away in shame. Some shifted uncomfortably. But the Okoro family continued walking with their chests high, as if they owned the ground beneath them. Cato felt heat rise in his chest. His father had not been a rich man, but he had been a man of honor, respected across Makuta. The rumors, the insults, the mockery, he wanted to shout back. But Uncle Baraka's voice echoed in his memory. In times of grief, dignity is louder than anger. Uncle Baraka stepped forward then, leaning on his carved walking stick. The old man's eyes were sharp, full of stories older than the town itself. His gray beard moved as he spoke. My people, he said softly, today we honor a man whose footsteps shaped this land. Let no tongue forget respect. The Okoro family paused, offering stiff nods that were more insult than obedience. Baraka turned to Cato. My son, your father walked with quiet strength. Do not let the noise of small hearts shake you. Cato nodded, swallowing hard. I will try, uncle. Then the whispers grew again, this time spreading faster, like wind through dry leaves. I heard the chief left no will. They say there is nothing at all. That boy will have to start life from the beginning. Members of Amara's family smirked openly now. One of the aunts stepped closer to Amara and said softly, My dear, you see why we warned you? Love is sweet, but poverty lasts longer. Amara's jaw tightened. This is not the time. The aunt raised an eyebrow. It is always the time to tell the truth. Before Amara could speak, Uncle Baraka lifted his voice again. This time, even the drums softened. The chief did leave something, Baraka said slowly. Something sealed. Something meant for the right moment. The homestead shifted. Murmurs rose. Heads turned. Even the wind seemed to pause. The Okoro family exchanged quick, nervous glances, their pride flickering like a weak flame. Cato blinked. A sealed what, uncle? Baraka's old eyes fixed on him. Your father left a will, my child, but he ordered it to be opened only when the ancestors say the time is right. A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. The Okoro family stiffened. Their smiles faded just a little. Baraka tapped his staff on the earth. Today is not that day, but the truth will rise, just as the sun must rise after night. Cato felt something steady grow inside him, small but strong, like the first spark of a fire. The Okoro family stood frozen for a moment, their pride bruised but not broken. One uncle muttered, "We shall see," before turning away. Cato glanced at Amara. She gave him a soft, brave smile, one that said she would stand beside him, even when the whole world whispered. The drums continued deeper now, carrying a promise in their rhythm. Something was coming, something hidden, something powerful, and the town of Makuta watched in silence, waiting for the story to unfold. The wind moved slowly through Chief Manla's homestead, carrying the scent of dust, ashes, and grieving hearts. Though Makuta had grown into a modern town with glass shops and busy roads, moments like this reminded everyone that tradition still held the people together like an old, strong rope. Soft drum beats echoed across the compound, steady, calm, and respectful. The elders said the drums spoke to the ancestors, telling them that another soul was on the way. The sound wrapped around the mourners like a dark cloth. Faces were lowered, voices were soft, and even the children walked with quiet steps. Cato sat close to the front, the place reserved for the chief's bloodline. His hands were cold, his eyes tired from crying through the night. Losing his father felt like the sky itself had cracked open. Chief Manla had been more than a parent. He had been Cato's guide, his shield, the pillar that kept their home standing. Now that pillar was gone, and Cato felt the weight of the world pressing on his shoulders. Beside him, Amara held his hand tightly. Her touch was warm, but her heart was pulled in two directions. She loved her husband deeply. Yet she knew her family's pride was a knife waiting to cut anything they disapproved of. She whispered softly to him, "Be strong, my love. Your father walks with the ancestors now." But moments of peace never last long when prideful hearts enter a sacred place. A sharp wave of perfume drifted through the air, too sweet, too loud for morning. Heads turned. The Okoro family had arrived. Their clothes shone with gold beads and bright embroidery, more suited for a celebration than a funeral. Earrings sparkled like they were competing with the sun. Their shoes clicked against the earth, announcing their presence before their voices did. They walked as though the ground beneath them was unworthy. One of the aunts whispered loudly enough for half the compound to hear, "So this is where Amara lives now? A chief's house should be grand, not simple like this." Another replied, shaking her head slowly, "My dear, even our driver's quarters look better." Their words sliced through the air. Cato heard every whisper. He kept his eyes down, swallowing the sting. He remembered the teachings of his father. A lion does not turn when a small dog barks. But today, even the lion inside him felt wounded. Rumors had already begun to swirl among the mourners. Quiet talk, quick glances, the kind that stabs without touching. "They say the chief left nothing," someone murmured behind Cato. "No money, no property," another added. "Not even a proper will." A group from the Okoro family chuckled softly. "That is what happens when you follow simple men," one uncle said with a crooked smile. "Their children inherit only stories." Amara stiffened. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Why must they talk like this today?" Cato forced a faint smile, though it barely held. "Let them speak," he said quietly. "My father's worth is not measured by coins." But despite his words, The shame pressed on him like a heavy stone. Then came the sound of a wooden staff tapping the earth. Slow, strong, unyielding. Every head turned. Uncle Baraka walked forward with steps that carried the wisdom of decades. His beard was gray like old smoke, his eyes deep like a river that had seen many storms. Though age had bent his back slightly, his spirit stood tall. He carried with him a small leather pouch, the one that held the seal of Chief Manla. He stopped before the crowd, raising his staff. The drum softened, as if bowing to him. "My people," Baraka began, his voice calm but steady. "Today we mourn a great tree that has fallen. Chief Manla walked with honor, and even death cannot erase a man's dignity." The Okoro family folded their arms, their faces polite but mocking beneath the surface. Baraka looked directly at them. "In times of sorrow, let our tongues be gentle. This homestead is a place of respect, not pride." An Okoro uncle scoffed quietly. "Respect is earned." Baraka's eyes sharpened. "Be careful. Pride has broken stronger men than you." A quiet ripple moved through the mourners. Baraka then turned to Cato. "My son, do not let their words shake your spirit. Your father left you more than they can understand." Cato frowned softly. "But the people say he left nothing." Baraka lifted the leather pouch slightly, letting the crowd glimpse it. Their murmurs stopped. "Your father left a will," he announced. "A sealed will, sealed by his own hand and blessed by the spirits of our ancestors." The entire homestead fell into sudden stillness. Even the Okoro family froze. Their proud faces twitched as worry slipped into their eyes. Baraka continued, "He gave me the will and said it must not be opened until the time chosen by the ancestors. And that time is not today." A strong hush swept the compound. People looked at each other with wide, curious eyes. The drums began again, slow, deep, mysterious. Amara leaned close to Cato. "Your father planned something," she whispered. Cato felt a strange spark inside his chest, small but bright. "Yes," he said softly, "he did." Uncle Baraka tapped his staff once more on the earth. "Let no one here mistake silence for emptiness. Sometimes what is hidden carries more power than what is seen." The Okoro family shifted uneasily. Their confidence cracked just a little. And in the heart of the homestead, beneath the echo of the drums, a new tension settled across the air, one that promised change and a revelation waiting to rise like a storm. The sun hung low above Makuta town, glowing red like an eye watching from the heavens. Even though the town had shiny shops and new buildings, the heart of the people still beat with old customs. And today, those customs wrapped themselves around Chief Manla's homestead like a sacred cloth. Slow drum beats rolled through the air. Dum, dum, dum. Each beat felt like it carried the weight of an ancestor. Women sat in lines, humming old funeral songs that spoke of journeys to the spirit world. Men gathered beneath the large merula tree, their faces carved with silence. Cato walked through the homestead with his shoulders heavy, almost dragging. His eyes were red, his heart bruised. Losing his father felt like losing both sun and shade. Some people greeted him with gentle nods, but he barely noticed. His mind kept echoing the same thought. "I hope I made him proud." Behind him walked Amara, her hand resting on his back. She looked at him with love, but fear sat quietly in her chest. Her family's presence, their pride, their sharp words. She could already feel trouble hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. Then the whispers began, soft at first, easily ignored, but little by little they grew teeth. "I heard the chief left nothing," a woman murmured as Cato passed. "Nothing at all," another added. "No land, no cattle, no savings. His son will suffer." A man chimed in, smirking. "Imagine being a chief and dying empty-handed." The whispers traveled quickly, spreading like ants on sugar. Laughter followed, small but painful. Amara winced. She reached for Cato's hand and whispered, "Ignore them, love. They don't know the truth." But Cato's jaw tightened. Though he said nothing, the words stabbed him one by one. Then came the Okoro family. They entered like a parade, loud clothes, shiny jewelry, gold watches that flashed even in the dim light. Their laughter was too bright for a funeral, their steps too proud. They held their noses slightly up, as if humility was something only poor people wore. Auntie Mabel from the Okoro side leaned toward her sister and said loudly, "Look at this place. A chief lived here? It looks like the spare property behind our house." Her sister laughed. "I told Amara she married down, but she wouldn't listen." Another uncle added in a sharp tone, "What did she expect? The boy comes from people who store their wealth in stories, not in banks." Their insults did not hide. They did not whisper. They wanted to be heard. Cato froze for a moment, his fingers curling. His chest felt hot with shame, but he said nothing, because this was his father's funeral. And in their culture, arguing in front of the dead was like inviting misfortune. A group of young men from a village joined the gossip. "Imagine," one said, "a whole chief dying without even a will." Another shook his head. "No treasure, no messages, no blessings, only this old homestead. And the boy," someone added, "poor thing will inherit dust." Laughter rippled. The words hit Cato like stones. The Okoro family smirked, clearly enjoying how quickly the rumors were turning the funeral into a stage of shame. Amara felt tears burn her eyes. "Please," she begged her family softly. "Not today. Respect the dead." But Auntie Mabel waved her off. "Respect? Let those who have something to respect show it. If the chief truly had anything, we would have seen signs already." Amara squeezed her eyes shut, wishing she could disappear. Her loyalty pulled her in two directions, toward her husband, who carried pain silently, and toward her family, whose pride towered like a wall of fire. Suddenly, an elder woman touched Cato's arm gently. "My son," she said, "do not bow your head. A tree may seem dry outside, but inside, the roots may still carry power." Cato nodded weakly, but the words around him still hurt. As the drums continued, more murmurs floated through the compound. They say the chief's land was taken by debt. They say he sold everything before he died. They say the old man lived on pride alone. Every rumor stabbed deeper than the last. And above it all, the Okoro family's mouths kept moving, like birds feeding on fresh grain. "Poor roots," one uncle whispered loudly. "Poor roots always produce poor fruit." Cato heard that clearly. His breath shook. He looked at the sky, hoping his father's spirit could not hear this humiliation. Amara stepped closer to him and whispered, "Your father was a great man. Don't let their words steal that from your heart." Cato nodded, but pain clouded his eyes. At that moment, Uncle Baraka appeared near the doorway of the chief's hut. His walking staff tapped the ground with slow, powerful rhythm. He watched the crowd with deep, knowing eyes. He heard the rumors. He saw the mockery. And though he did not speak yet, the look on his face said one thing: the truth is coming. And when it arrives, the tongues that laugh today may tremble tomorrow. The gossip continued, but a faint shift touched the air, like wind before rainfall. The ancestors, silent but present, seemed to be watching the pride, the shame, the cruelty. Something was building, something hidden, something waiting. And Cato, standing in the center of the whispers, did not yet know that everything people mocked him for would soon return to humble them all. The drums beat low, like the heartbeat of the ancestors hiding behind the wind. The red dust of Makuta swirled around the homestead as mourners gathered, their voices soft, their footsteps heavy. Even though the town now had paved roads and bright streetlights, moments like this pulled everyone back into the old ways. Cato stood near the doorway of his father's hut, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. His face carried the weight of a man trying not to break. His father once told him, "A true man's strength is not in his fists, but in the silence he can endure." Today, those words felt like both a blessing and a curse. Women hummed funeral songs that floated through the air like smoke. The elders sat on wooden stools, leaning on their staffs, their eyes reflecting memories of many funerals before this one. Cato kept his head bowed. He greeted mourners with quiet nod, just as his father taught him. No pride, no noise, only dignity. But dignity was difficult to hold when the world around him was filled with sharp tongues. The Okoro family arrived first with their loud perfumes and shining clothes. Their footsteps did not match the mood of a funeral. They walked as if entering a wedding hall. Gold chains hung from their necks, and their robes looked stitched with pride itself. Auntie Mabel clicked her tongue loudly when she saw the homestead. So this is where a whole chief lived? My goodness, even my driver's house is bigger. Laughter followed, light and poisonous. Uncle Okoro leaned close to another relative. "Look at Cato," he said, not bothering to hide his voice. "He stands like a tree without roots. Poor boy, poor family, poor future." Another added, "Imagine being married to a man whose father left nothing but stories. By now they should have shown something. Land papers, cattle, money, anything." Their whispers crawled to the gathering like snakes through dry grass. Cato heard them, every single word, but he kept his head lowered, breathing slowly, fighting the heat rising in his chest. Amara stepped closer to him, her eyes glassy. "I'm here," she whispered. "Don't let their words take your strength." Cato forced a small smile. "My father always said, when a lion dies, the hyenas dance, but they forget the lion's cub still grows." Amara blinked back tears. She knew he was hurting, even though he pretended he was fine. But the mockery continued. A group of village boys whispered loudly as they passed. "I heard Chief Manla died with debts." "Yes," another added. "People said he sold his land long ago. Cato will inherit nothing but dust." Someone else laughed. "A poor chief, that a new story." Their laughter echoed, bouncing off the walls of the homestead like cruel spirits. Amara's family stood proudly, watching Cato's humiliation as if it were entertainment. They shook their heads, making comments meant to slice. "This is what happens when a girl marries below her level," Auntie Mabel said. "Love cannot replace wealth." Amara clenched her hands tightly, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to shout, to defend Cato, but her voice felt trapped beneath the weight of her family's pride. Cato remained still, even as shame pressed against his chest like a stone. In moments like this, he remembered his father's last teachings. Never fight during a funeral. The dead deserve peace. Then Uncle Baraka appeared, leaning on his carved staff. His steps were slow, but his presence carried power. His deep eyes scanned the crowd, taking the gossip, the pride, the insults. He did not say a word, but his silence felt louder than the drums. The Okoro family's laughter softened. The whispers calmed. A strange stillness swept through the homestead, as if the air itself held its breath. And in that stillness, Cato lifted his head for the first time. His eyes were filled with pain, yes, but also with the quiet strength of a man who had endured much and still stood tall. What no one knew, not the mockers, not the proud Okoros, not even Cato, was that the truth inside the seal would soon shake the dust off every rumor, silence every mocking tongue, and reveal a legacy far deeper than anyone expected. For now, he simply waited, just as his father taught him. The sun hung low over the modern town of Makuta, its golden light mixing with the shadows of tall buildings and old mud brick homes. Even though the town had changed over the years, the heart of its traditions still beat strong. That heartbeat echoed to the homestead of the late Chief Manla, where mourners gathered in silence. Soft drums sounded in the distance, slow, steady, respectful. Every beat carried the weight of generations. Women wrapped in deep-colored cloths hummed ancestral songs, while men sat in circles, whispering prayers for the chief's journey to the land of the spirits. Cato stood near the entrance, his head bowed. His eyes were swollen, but not from tears alone. Losing his father felt like losing the ground beneath him. Chief Manla had been more than a father. He was his guide, his teacher, the man who taught him that true strength lives in silence. Amara moved quietly to stand beside her husband. She touched his arm softly. "Cato, breathe. Your father walks with the ancestors now," she whispered. Cato nodded but kept his gaze on the ground. "I know, but my heart, it is not ready to let him go." Before Mara could reply, loud voices rose from the gate. Her family had arrived. The Okoro family entered as though attending a royal celebration instead of a funeral. Their clothes sparkled, their perfume filled the air, and their faces carried expressions sharper than blades. A few mourners exchanged glances, but tradition demanded silence, so no one confronted them. Amara's mother leaned close to her sister, her voice low but sharp enough to cut through the quiet. "Look at him," she scoffed, nodding toward Cato. "Chief's son, yet his shoes are dusty like a market boy." Her sister smirked. "A chief's house should look like a palace. Instead, it looks simple. Maybe the old man truly left nothing worth showing." Cato heard every word, but he didn't flinch. His father had warned him about people who measure worth by gold instead of goodness. Amara stiffened. "Mother, please. Not today." But her mother waved her off. "You married too far down, Amara. A woman of our blood deserves more." Amara looked at Cato, guilt rising in her chest. She wanted to offend him, but years of her family's pressure sat heavy on her tongue. Across the yard, Uncle Baraka approached. His walking stick tapped against the earth, steady and slow. His presence alone carried authority. His gray robes looked simple, but the beads around his neck marked him as keeper of the chief's last wishes. He placed a hand on Cato's shoulder. "My son, your father left a path for you. Do not let the whispers of empty hearts shake you." Cato breathed out, steadying himself. "I hear them, uncle, but I will honor my father's teaching. He said dignity is a shield stronger than iron." Baraka smiled. "Wise words. The ancestors watch you today." But the Okoro family did not stop. A young man from their side laughed softly. "If the chief truly left behind something valuable, we would have seen it by now. Maybe the will is empty. Maybe Manlo was just an old man with stories." A hush fell over the homestead. Even the drums sounded softer, as though the ancestors themselves were listening. Elders turned their heads. Mourners paused mid-breath. Disrespect toward the dead was a dangerous thing, both spiritually and socially. Yet Cato remained still. His fist tightened, but he said nothing. His father had always told him, silence is not weakness. It is the breath before truth speaks. Amara watched him with worry. "Cato, do not carry this alone." He gave her a small, sad smile. "I carry my father's name. That is enough for today." Rumors swirled through the homestead like dust in the wind. Voices whispered, "Maybe the will holds nothing. Perhaps the land is gone. Or maybe Manla favored someone else." The whispers stung, but Cato kept his eyes fixed on the old wooden chest where his father's seal rested. It had not been opened yet. Only Uncle Baraka knew the truth inside. As the sky darkened, a heavy calm settled over the homestead. The air felt thick, like the moment before a storm breaks. Elders felt it. Children felt it. Even the proud Okoro family paused for a heartbeat. Uncle Baraka raised his staff and spoke, his voice deep and steady. "The ancestors are near tonight. Their truth is close. Let all tongues be quiet and all hearts be humble." Everyone fell silent. The wind shifted. The drums slowed. A single bird cried from a distant tree. Cato closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the moment, though insults burned him. Something stronger rose within, his father's spirit, guiding him to stand tall in dignity. In that stillness, it felt as if the earth itself held its breath. The truth, whatever it was coming. And nothing in Makuta would remain the same after it was spoken.